For the first time in a decade, Florida Fish and Wildlife is considering the option of reinstituting a bear hunt. Following a series of public meetings, FWC staff will offer their proposals later this month if a hunt should return. That appears to be likely. To help us understand what a returning bear hunt could entail, we are joined by Mark Barton, an ecologist and the fundraising chair for the Florida chapter of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Thank you for joining us, Mark. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we know the state obviously monitors the bear population, and I believe there's just about 4,000 bears in the state of Florida. That's nearly double what it was 20 years ago. Why do you think now is the time for another bear hunt?
So just to be clear, that 4,000 number is from 2015, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that the bear population has increased substantially since then. There's a number of scientific articles that support this. But more importantly, we know that in the bear management units, which were essentially established because there were subpopulations that were genetically distinct within the state, we know that those populations are well above the minimum threshold that was established by FWC over a decade ago. And so we know that these populations are sustainable. We know that there is a resource there that we can use to generate funding for conservation.
You were telling me earlier that there's some hot spots for bears. There's other areas that don't have very many bears or any at all. So, some folks are concerned that, this could be a problem for the population growth in the future. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, our goal as conservationists is to make sure that we're not having detrimental impact to the population. We don't want to see that population decrease. And the way that the proposed hunt is set up, it should prevent that from happening. And in terms of the unevenness in the population, there are certain areas where we really do need to reduce that density. But in other areas, we really want to encourage bears to move into those areas. And so there's certain ways that the biologists are going about that, but they've been incredibly thoughtful in addressing everybody's concerns.
A lot of the folks arguing against this bear hunt point to the problems in the previous hunt. I believe that was in 2015. Their concerns were about baby bears being killed and bears that were underweight. Can that be resolved for a future hunt?
Yeah, I think it's important to address as well that the regulations that are put in place are very conservative. And so when you say baby bears, we're really talking about subadult bears that were just beneath the threshold that FWC had set, which was 100 pounds. As I said, this is very conservative. In other states like Georgia, that threshold is at 80 pounds. So those bears that are a few pounds below that, they're not really baby bears. But that said, this is obviously not the goal. This is not what we want. But it is inevitable that people will occasionally make some mistakes. And the people that made those mistakes were dealt with. They were issued fines and whatever FWC needed to do to deal with those situations.
So Mark, what specifically is different from this year's proposal on the hunt compared to the previous one?
So first, I think we should talk about the first hunt in 2015. It was organized in what they call a derby, which is essentially that anybody can buy a tag, and then they have a quota that they're trying to meet. And people are reporting when they make a harvest, and when they get close to that quota, they close the hunt. So this style of hunt sort of incentivizes hunters to harvest the first bear that they see, because if they wait for a different or a bigger bear, then they might not have another chance because the hunt might be closed already. And so because of this, there was a higher female to male ratio of harvest. And we want to avoid that in the future. So for this hunt, the number of tags allocated is the quota. So there's 187 people that are going to have tags, and that means that at maximum, only 187 bears will be harvested. They've made sure that the season is a little bit longer. That allows hunters to be more selective so they can wait for that larger male bear, again, minimizing the chances of a female being harvested.
When we talked about these hot spots, so are there parts of the state that are really struggling with the bear population, and is that the reason for this? Or is it just like, folks fish on a regular basis, right?
I think it's more so the latter. So while there is potential impacts that a hunt could have on conflicts that happen between humans and bears, that is not the reason for this hunt. The reason for this hunt is to reduce the populations in areas where the density is simply too high. And there's a number of reasons for that. But one of them is that we don't want to get to a place where bears are depleting their resources, because when a population reaches that, let's call it a carrying capacity, that leads to unhealthy bears. They're not going to have the food resources that they need. There's going to be territorial issues. It causes a lot of stress for the bear. So we don't really want to get there. And in a lot of places, we have already sort of gotten there. So reducing the density of the bears in those areas is important.
You told me earlier that you felt that this hunt could be done in an ethical way. I just want to tap into that a little bit. I know one of the complaints about the previous hunt was that baiting was used. Talk to me about how you ideally would like this hunt to go.
So baiting was actually not allowed during the past hunt. And while there has been speculation that some people used bait, I'm not sure. I don't believe that there's any evidence that that was actually the case. Now, there inevitably are going to be people who break rules. That is the case with anything. But the best way to deal with those people that are breaking rules is to make sure that FWC has enough funding. And that funding is generated by license sales, tag sales, guns and ammo, and really anything that you associate with hunting gets charged an extra tax that specifically is designed to go towards these conservation funds.
What is your hope as far as how the state handles a future hunt, assuming that it happens? What do you want them to do differently?
I think what me and the rest of BHA would like them to do differently is actually—
And BHA is?
Sorry, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Is actually what FWC has proposed. They've done, as I mentioned before, they've done a really good job at addressing the concerns. And so with this hunt, the proposed hunt, their goal is to minimize female harvests, because ecologically speaking, females are far more important than males. They sort of drive population growth. So if we can minimize female harvest, that also means that we're minimizing potential detrimental impact that the hunt could have on the population. And really the ultimate goal here is to make sure that that population growth doesn't go negative. And so they've been incredibly conservative with the rules that they've proposed to ensure that this population is going to continue growing while we remove some individuals from those areas that have really high densities.
Mark Barton, we so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We've got more great content for you, from news to the arts to the environment. So be sure to like and subscribe to WGCU's YouTube channel and follow us on our social media platforms for the stories that matter to you.